The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the darkness at 5:30 a.m., just as it had every morning for the past 3 years. Sarah Martinez rolled over in her cramped studio apartment in Queens, her body aching from another late shift at Romano's Italian restaurant the night before. The tips had been good, $127 after splitting with the busboys, but her feet still throbbed from standing for 8 hours straight in heels that had seen better days. She padded across the cold hardwood floor to her tiny kitchenette, stepping carefully around the textbooks that were still scattered from her late-night study session. Her Columbia MBA thesis lay open on the small dining table, pages covered with charts about supply chain optimization and efficiency metrics. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was writing about corporate logistics while living in a 400-square-foot apartment and surviving on ramen noodles and whatever meals the restaurant let her take home. "Morning, mijo," she whispered into her phone, calling her younger brother Miguel at his dorm at SUNY Albany. "I know it's early, but I wanted to catch you before your economics exam." "Sarah, you don't have to call me every morning." Miguel's sleepy voice carried through the speaker, but she could hear the smile in his tone. "I'm 22, not 12. "I know, but I worry. Did you eat breakfast? Do you have enough money for books this semester?" "Yes, Mom," he teased, but his voice grew serious. "Sarah, I know what today is. The Sterling and Associates interview. You're going to crush it." Sarah looked at herself in the bathroom mirror as she brushed her teeth, studying the woman staring back at her. Dark circles under brown eyes that had seen too many 18-hour days. Hands that were soft now, but still bore tiny scars from her early restaurant days when she was learning to navigate around hot plates and sharp knives. At 28, she sometimes felt like she was 40. "I hope so, Miguel. This job, it could change everything for us." "It will," he said with the confidence that only a little brother could have in his big sister. "Remember what Abuela always said, el trabajo duro siempre da frutos. Hard work always bears fruit." Their grandmother's words had carried Sarah through 6 years of double shifts, through every humiliation she'd endured, from customers who treated servers like they were invisible, through every professor who seemed surprised that someone with her background could keep up with classmates whose parents had paid their full tuition up front. After hanging up, Sarah carefully applied her makeup, drugstore foundation that she'd learned to blend perfectly, mascara that made her tired eyes look alert, lipstick in a shade called Confidence that she'd splurged on for interviews. Her one good business suit hung on the closet door, a black blazer and skirt, set she'd found at a consignment shop in Manhattan. It had probably cost someone $800 originally. She'd paid $65 for it. The subway ride into Manhattan took 45 minutes, giving her time to review her presentation one more time. She knew the Henderson Industries case study backwards and forwards. She'd spent 3 months researching their supply chain issues, analyzing their quarterly reports, and developing solutions that could save them millions. Her thesis advisor at Columbia had called her analysis brilliant and industry-changing. If she could just get Sterling and Associates to see past her background and focus on her capabilities. The Meridian Tower pierced the grey October sky like a glass and steel monument to ambition. Sarah had been in plenty of fancy buildings during her Columbia years, but this was different. This was where she might finally transform from Sarah Martinez, the girl from Queens who served other people's food, to Sarah Martinez, senior business analyst. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and money. Business people in $1,000 suits moved with purpose across the polished floors, their conversations about mergers and market trends echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Sarah checked her reflection in the elevator's polished walls one more time, straightening her blazer and running through her opening lines in her head. The 42nd floor receptionist was blonde, perfectly coiffed, and wearing a watch that probably cost more than Sarah made in 6 months. "Ms. Martinez?" She looked up from her mahogany desk with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ms. Victoria Sterling will see you in conference room A, down the hall, last door on your right. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? Sparkling water?" "No, thank you," Sarah replied, though her mouth was dry with nerves. She'd learned long ago not to eat or drink before important meetings. It was too easy for something to go wrong, to spill something on her one good suit, or have her voice crack at the worst worst moment. The hallway leading to conference room A was lined with photographs of Victoria Sterling with various celebrities, politicians, and Fortune 500 CEOs. There she was with the mayor of New York, cutting the ribbon at a charity gala. There she was, with the CEO of Google, both of them laughing at some private joke. And there, in the largest frame, was Victoria Sterling alone, accepting some kind of Businesswoman of the Year award, her silver hair immaculate, her smile confident and cold. Sarah paused at the conference room door, taking a deep breath and running through her mental checklist one more time. She'd prepared for every possible question, every potential objection. She'd researched each person who would be in the room, memorized their backgrounds and recent projects. This was her moment, the culmination of years of sacrifice and hard work. The conference room was intimidating in its understated luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Central Park, where she could see tiny figures of people jogging and walking dogs. The conference table was a massive piece of polished glass that probably cost more than most people's cars, surrounded by leather chairs that looked like they belonged in a luxury hotel. Victoria Sterling sat at the head of the table like a queen holding court. At 55, she was undeniably striking, silver hair pulled back in a chignon that had probably cost $300 that morning, a Chanel suit in navy blue that fit her like it had been sewn onto her body, jewelry that caught the light with every small movement. But it was her eyes that commanded attention, sharp, calculating, missing nothing. To her right sat James Morrison, Sterling and Associates head of operations, a man in his 50s whose Rolex gleamed against his crisp white shirt. Next to him was Robert Chen, the managing partner, whose Harvard class ring caught Sarah's attention as he shuffled through papers. And across from them sat Jennifer Walsh, who looked to be about Sarah's age, her auburn hair in a neat bob, taking notes on an iPad with the intensity of someone who knew her job depended on not missing anything. "Ms. Martinez," Victoria said, without looking up from the document she was reviewing. Sarah's resume, she realized with a start. "Please sit down." Sarah chose the chair directly across from Victoria, setting her portfolio on the table and arranging her materials carefully. She'd practiced this moment dozens of times in her studio apartment, using her tiny dining table as a prop. But the reality of sitting across from one of New York's most powerful businesswomen made her heart race. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute as Victoria continued reading. Sarah could hear the distant hum of traffic 42 floors below, the soft scratching of Jennifer's stylus on her iPad, the almost imperceptible tick of James Morrison's expensive watch. She forced herself to sit straight, to keep her hands steady, to project the confidence she'd been building for years. "I understand you're here about the Henderson Industries account," Victoria finally said, lifting her eyes to meet Sarah's. Her gaze was like being evaluated by a machine, cold, precise, calculating value and finding potential for disappointment. "Tell me, Ms. Martinez, why should Sterling and Associates trust someone with your unique background to handle our most important client?" The way she said unique background made Sarah's stomach tighten, but she pressed forward with the opening she'd rehearsed. "Miss Sterling, thank you for this opportunity. I've conducted an extensive analysis of Henderson Industries' operational challenges, and I believe I've identified significant inefficiencies in their supply chain that are costing them approximately $2.3 million per quarter." She opened her portfolio and began laying out charts and graphs, each one representing hours of research and analysis. Their primary bottleneck appears to be in their distribution network, specifically the routing algorithms they're using for their Midwest facilities. "I've identified 7 key areas where optimization could reduce costs by 15% while actually improving delivery times." Victoria held up her hand, her diamond bracelet catching the light streaming through the windows. "Wait, Ms. Martinez. Before you continue with your little presentation, I think we need to address the elephant in the room." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach, but she maintained her composure. "Of course, Ms. Sterling." Victoria picked up Sarah's resume and held it like it was something distasteful. "I see here that you spent 6 years. 6 years, Ms. Martinez, working as a server at various restaurants." She looked around the table at her colleagues, as if sharing a private joke. "Romano's Italian, Giuseppe's, the Riverside Cafe, quite a tour of New York's dining scene." Yes, ma'am, Sarah replied evenly. I worked my way through my undergraduate degree and MBA program. It taught me valuable skills in customer service, crisis management, and working under pressure while managing multiple priorities simultaneously. How admirable, Victoria said, her tone dripping with condescension. But tell me, Ms. Martinez, what exactly qualifies a former waitress to advise Fortune 500 companies on multi-million-dollar operational decisions? The room fell silent. Sarah felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. Ms. Sterling, my experience in hospitality gave me unique insights into operational efficiency and customer satisfaction. When you're managing 12 tables during a dinner rush, you learn about logistics, timing, and crisis management in ways that many consultants never experience. Combined with my MBA from Columbia, where I graduated summa cum laude, and my internship experience at Morrison Analytics, I believe I bring a perspective that many traditional consultants lack. Columbia, Victoria repeated with a laugh that was sharp enough to cut glass. Let me guess the whole story, Ms. Martinez. Student loans that you'll be paying off until you're 50, night classes after your serving shifts, the inspiring tale of the hard-working scholarship girl pulling herself up by her bootstraps. James Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at Robert Chen with what looked like concern. Jennifer Walsh stopped taking notes entirely and looked up from her iPad, her expression troubled. Sarah straightened her shoulders, drawing on every ounce of dignity she possessed. Yes, Miss Sterling, I worked 3 jobs to pay for my education because I believe in investing in myself and my future. I served food during the day, attended classes in the evening, and studied until the early hours of the morning because I knew that education was the key to creating a better life for myself and my family. Your family? Victoria's eyebrows arched with interest. Let me guess, you're putting a sibling through school, supporting aging parents, the whole noble sacrifice narrative. I'm helping my younger brother complete his degree, Sarah said carefully, but I don't see how my personal circumstances relate to my qualifications for this position. Victoria leaned back in her leather chair, a predator playing with her prey. Oh, but they do relate, Ms. Martinez. You see, our clients, Fortune 500 CEOs, board members, industry leaders, they expect a certain pedigree from their consultants. They want to work with people who understand their world, who move in their circles, who speak their language. No, she gestured around the opulent conference room. They don't want someone who spent the last 6 years asking, would you like fries with that? They want consultants who went to the right schools, who come from the right families, who have never had to worry about whether they could afford rent next month. With all due respect, Ms. Sterling, Sarah said, her voice remaining calm despite the fury building inside her, I believe my diverse background gives me unique insights into operational efficiency and customer satisfaction that could benefit your clients. My thesis on supply chain optimization was selected for publication in the Harvard Business Review, and my analysis methods have already been adopted by 3 major corporations. Enough, Victoria snapped, standing abruptly. Her chair rolled backward, hitting the credenza behind her with a soft thud. I've heard enough of this fairy tale. James, she turned to Morrison, please show Ms. Martinez out. We clearly made a mistake in bringing her in for this interview. Sarah began gathering her materials, her hands steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. Years of dealing with difficult customers had taught her how to maintain her composure under pressure, but this was different. This wasn't just about a bad tip or a rude comment. This was about her future, her dreams, her brother's education. You know what? Victoria continued, her voice rising loud enough to carry beyond the conference room. I honestly don't know who thought it was a good idea to waste our time with a stupid waitress who thinks an MBA makes her qualified to run with the big dogs. This is Sterling and Associates, not some community college career counseling center. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow, but what hurt more was seeing the expressions around the room. James Morrison looked genuinely horrified, his face flushed with embarrassment. Robert Chen was staring down at his papers, clearly uncomfortable with his boss's behavior, and Jennifer Walsh was looking directly at Sarah with an expression of pure outrage, her iPad forgotten in her lap. Sarah finished packing her portfolio, each movement deliberate and dignified. She stood up slowly, smoothed down her blazer, and looked directly at Victoria Sterling. "Ms. Sterling," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent room, "I want to thank you for your time today. I'm sorry this didn't work out, and I hope the rest of your day goes better than mine has." The grace in her words seemed to surprise everyone in the room, including Victoria herself. Sarah walked toward the door with her head held high, her portfolio clutched firmly in her hand. As she reached for the door handle, she heard Jennifer Walsh clear her throat softly. "Ms. Sterling, I think we should reconsider. The decision has been made." Victoria cut her off sharply. "Ms. Martinez, good luck in your future endeavors." Sarah opened the door and stepped into the hallway, closing it softly behind her. As she walked toward the elevator, she could hear muffled voices from the conference room. It sounded like an argument, though she couldn't make out the words. The elevator doors opened immediately, as if the universe was eager to help her escape this humiliation as quickly as possible. As the doors closed and the elevator began its descent, Sarah finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. 41 floors, 40 floors, 39 floors. The numbers counted down like a timer on her dreams. By the time she reached the ground floor, tears were threatening to spill over, but she held them back through sheer force of will. She wouldn't give Victoria Sterling the satisfaction of knowing how completely she had shattered Sarah's confidence. The marble lobby seemed different now, less impressive, more intimidating. The business people hurrying past looked like they belonged to a world that would never accept her, no matter how hard she worked or how qualified she became. As Sarah pushed through the revolving doors onto the busy Manhattan sidewalk, she had no idea that Jennifer Walsh was already uploading a video to LinkedIn, or that Victoria Sterling was about to receive a phone call that would change both of their lives forever. She also had no idea that the worst moment of her professional life was about to become the catalyst for something extraordinary. The October air was crisp against her face as she walked away from the Meridian Tower, each step taking her further from her shattered dreams and closer to a destiny she couldn't yet imagine. Behind her, 42 floors up, Victoria Sterling was settling back into her chair, already dismissing Sarah Martinez from her mind as she turned her attention to the afternoon's agenda. The Blackwood Corporation presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m., and it was going to be the crowning achievement of her career. She had no way of knowing that in less than 2 hours, the stupid waitress she had just humiliated would be sitting in another conference room, about to accept the contract that Victoria considered her biggest victory. Sometimes the universe has a sense of poetic justice that operates faster than anyone expects. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she stood on the sidewalk outside the Meridian Tower, the weight of Victoria Sterling's cruel words still echoing in her mind. Stupid waitress. The phrase felt like a brand, marking her as someone who would never be good enough for the world she desperately wanted to join. The October afternoon was crisp, with that particular clarity that comes before the first real cold snap of winter. Manhattan buzzed around her with its usual energy. Yellow taxis honking in traffic, food vendors calling out their specials, business people talking rapidly into their phones as they hurried past. For a moment, Sarah felt completely disconnected from it all, like she was watching a movie of life happening around her rather than participating in it. She pulled out her phone to call an Uber back to Queens, but before she could open the app, it rang. The caller ID showed a photo of David Chen grinning at the camera during their Columbia graduation ceremony 2 years ago. David had been her study partner in advanced operations management, the guy who'd helped her understand complex algorithms when she was running on 3 hours of sleep and too much coffee. "Sarah Martinez speaking," she answered, trying to keep the defeat out of her voice. "Sarah, thank God you answered." David's voice was warm and excited, tinged with the kind of energy that usually meant good news. "I've been trying to reach you all morning. Are you still in the city?" Sarah leaned against the building's facade, watching the stream of business people hurrying past in their expensive suits and polished shoes. "Yes, I'm in Manhattan. I just finished a meeting that didn't go well." "Oh no, was it the Sterling and Associates thing?" "I'm sorry, Sarah. I know how much you wanted that position." Oh, the kindness in his voice almost broke her composure. David was one of the few people who truly understood what it meant to work your way through business school, to balance academic excellence with the exhaustion of multiple jobs. His parents owned a small restaurant in Chinatown, and he'd spent years working in their kitchen before landing his current job. "It's okay," Sarah lied. "These things happen. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I might have something that will completely turn your day around." She could hear the smile in his voice, and despite everything, she felt a tiny spark of hope. What kind of something? "Remember how we used to talk about Blackwood Corporation during those late-night study sessions? How they were the gold standard for ethical business practices and employee treatment?" "Of course," Sarah said. Blackwood Corporation was legendary in business school circles, a manufacturing company that had grown from a single factory in Detroit to a multinational operation worth billions, all while maintaining a reputation for treating employees fairly and operating with integrity. "Well, I work there now. I'm a senior operations manager, and Sarah, something incredible just happened. Our CEO just fired our current consulting firm, and he's looking for immediate replacement for a presentation this afternoon." Sarah's heart stopped. "David, what consulting firm?" "Sterling and Associates." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Sarah gripped her phone tighter, not quite believing what she was hearing. "Sterling and Associates, are you sure?" "Completely sure. Mr. Blackwood fired them about an hour ago, and he is not happy. We need a replacement consultant for a presentation at 2 p.m. today. Sarah, I recommended you." Sarah's mind was racing, trying to process what this meant. "David, why did he fire them? What happened?" David's voice dropped to a whisper, even though she could tell he was somewhere private. "Between you and me, someone recorded Victoria Sterling making some really awful comments about a job candidate this morning. The video went viral on LinkedIn within an hour, and when Mr. Blackwood saw it, he was furious." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "What kind of comments?" "About someone who used to work in restaurants. She called them, well, she used some pretty derogatory language. Mr. Blackwood saw the video during a board meeting and immediately terminated their contract. He said he refuses to work with anyone who treats people that way." Sarah's legs felt weak. She looked around for somewhere to sit and spotted a small coffee shop across the street. "David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course, anything." "The job candidate in the video, was it about someone who worked as a server?" There was a pause. "Sarah, wait. How did you... Oh my God, were you at Sterling and Associates this morning?" Sarah closed her eyes, the full magnitude of the situation crashing over her like a wave. "David, I think I was the job candidate in that video." "Jesus Christ, Sarah. Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Victoria Sterling called me a stupid waitress in front of her entire team about 2 hours ago." "Oh my God," David breathed. "Sarah, you need to get over here right now. Mr. Blackwood specifically said he wants to meet the woman who handled herself with such dignity and professionalism in the face of that kind of treatment." Sarah stumbled across the street to the coffee shop, her mind reeling. "What do you mean?" "I mean the way you responded to her. Even after she said those horrible things, you thanked her for her time and wished her well." Mr. Blackwood was incredibly impressed. He said it showed more class and integrity than he's seen from most executives. Sarah sank into a chair by the window, staring up at the Meridian Tower, where Victoria Sterling was probably preparing for what she thought was going to be the biggest triumph of her career. "David, this can't be real." "It's real, Sarah, and it gets better. The consulting contract that Sterling and Associates just lost? It's worth $15 million over 2 years, with potential for international expansion. Mr. Blackwood wants to offer it to you." Sarah felt dizzy. $15 million. That was more money than she'd ever imagined working with. Enough to pay off her student loans, help Miguel through grad school if he wanted, maybe even help her parents with the mortgage on their house in Queens. "David, who recorded the video?" "Someone named Jennifer Walsh. She was in the meeting, apparently. She posted it with a caption about workplace dignity and respect. It already has over 100,000 views, and it's still climbing. Jennifer Walsh. Sarah remembered her clearly now. The young woman with auburn hair taking notes on her iPad. The one who had looked genuinely distressed when Victoria made her cruel comment. Jennifer had risked her own career to do the right thing. David, what happens next? Next, you come to Blackwood Corporation and show them why Sarah Martinez Consulting deserves this contract. Can you be here by 1:30? I want to prep you before the meeting with Mr. Blackwood at 2 p.m. Sarah looked at her reflection in the coffee shop window. Her makeup was still perfect, her blazer unwrinkled, her portfolio intact. More importantly, she had spent months preparing for exactly this kind of opportunity. The presentation she'd been about to give to Sterling and Associates would work just as well for Blackwood Corporation. Maybe better, since she wouldn't have to overcome their prejudices about her background. "Text me the address," she said, feeling strength and purpose returning to her voice. "And David, yeah? Thank you for believing in me, even when I'm not sure I believe in myself. Sarah, after seeing how you handled yourself in that video, I think you're exactly what the business world needs more of. Talent, integrity, and grace under pressure. I'll see you in an hour." As Sarah hung up, she noticed that several people in the coffee shop were glancing at their phones and then looking at her with recognition. Her phone was buzzing constantly now. Notifications from LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, even Facebook. The video was spreading faster than she could have imagined. She opened LinkedIn and found the video immediately. It was pinned at the top of her feed, shared by hundreds of people with comments ranging from outrage at Victoria's behavior to admiration for Sarah's composure. The video quality was crystal clear. Jennifer must have positioned her iPad perfectly to capture both their faces and voices. Watching herself on screen was surreal. She could see the moment when Victoria's words hit her, the slight tightening around her eyes, the way she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. But she could also see something she hadn't noticed in the moment. Her own dignity remained intact throughout the entire encounter. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. This young woman handled herself with incredible grace. Victoria Sterling should be ashamed. I've worked in restaurants, and this attitude is exactly why the service industry needs more respect. Good for Sarah Martinez. As a CEO myself, I would fire Victoria Sterling immediately. This is not how leaders behave. Sarah Martinez just earned herself a fan. I hope some company is smart enough to hire her after this. Sarah ordered a large coffee and opened her laptop. She had less than an hour to prepare the most important presentation of her life, and she wasn't going to waste a single minute of it. But first, she called Miguel. "Sarah, aren't you supposed to be in your big interview right now?" "Miguel, sit down. I have a story to tell you, and you're not going to believe it." For the next 10 minutes, Sarah explained everything: Victoria Sterling's cruelty, the viral video, David's call, and the opportunity that was now in front of her. When she finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. "Miguel, are you there?" "I'm here," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "Sarah, I'm so proud of you, not because of this opportunity, but because of how you handled yourself. Abuela would be so proud." Their grandmother had died 3 years ago, but Sarah could still hear her voice. "La dignidad no se puede comprar, mija. Se lleva dentro. Dignity can't be bought, my daughter. You carry it within yourself." "I love you, Miguel. I love you too. Now go show them what Sarah Martinez is made of." As Sarah worked on her presentation, she became aware of the buzz around her in the coffee shop. People were talking about the video, about workplace respect, about second chances. Some were even approaching her table to offer encouragement. "Excuse me," said a woman in her 40s, wearing scrubs that suggested she was a nurse on her break. "I just wanted to say that I saw your video, and I think what you did today was important. I've been treated like you were more times than I can count, and I've never handled it with as much class as you did." "Thank you," Sarah replied. "That means more than you know. My daughter is in college right now, working her way through just like you did. I'm going to show her your video tonight. You're an inspiration." Similar conversations happened 3 more times over the next hour. A construction worker buying coffee said he'd shared the video with his entire crew. A teacher said she was going to use it in a lesson about professional behavior and standing up for yourself with dignity. By the time Sarah was ready to leave for Blackwood Corporation, she realized that something bigger than just her own career was happening. The video wasn't just about her humiliation and subsequent opportunity. It had become a symbol for everyone who'd ever been underestimated, dismissed, or treated as less than because of their background or current circumstances. The Uber ride to Blackwood Corporation took 25 minutes through Midtown traffic, giving Sarah time to review her materials one more time and mentally prepare for what might be the most important meeting of her life. The Blackwood Corporation building was impressive in a completely different way from the Meridian Tower, where Sterling and Associates building was all glass and chrome, designed to intimidate and impress. The Blackwood building was solid stone and steel, built to last. The lobby featured a wall-sized mural depicting the company's history, from Richard Blackwood's grandfather, starting with a single manufacturing plant in 1952, to the global operation it had become. David was waiting for her in the lobby, and his grin was infectious. "Sarah, you look amazing. How are you feeling? Nervous, excited, terrified, grateful? Should I keep going?" "No, that sounds about right for someone who's about to land the biggest contract of their career. Come on, let me show you around and then we'll prep for the meeting." As they walked through the building, Sarah was struck by the differences from Sterling and Associates. The employees looked happy, diverse, engaged. There were photos on the walls showing company picnics, charity events, employee achievements. This felt like a place where people wanted to work, not just where they had to work. "David, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did Mr. Blackwood react so strongly to the video? I mean, I'm grateful, but it seems like a pretty extreme response." David stopped walking and turned to face her. "Sarah, do you know anything about Richard Blackwood's background? Just what was in the business journals. Self-made billionaire, started in his father's factory, built an empire. That's the public story, but there's more. His grandfather, the one who founded the company, was an Italian immigrant who was turned away from dozens of jobs because of his accent and his background. He was told more than once that his kind weren't welcome in certain companies. When he finally started his own factory, he swore that his company would judge people by their character and their capabilities, nothing else. They started walking again, passing more photos of company history. Richard grew up hearing those stories. His father made sure every Blackwood heir understood what it felt like to be dismissed and underestimated. When he saw that video of Victoria Sterling treating you that way, it wasn't just about business ethics for him. It was personal. They arrived at a conference room that was smaller and more welcoming than the one at Sterling and Associates. The table was made of warm cherry wood instead of cold glass, and the walls were lined with books rather than intimidating photographs of powerful people. "Sarah, before Mr. Blackwood gets here, I want to tell you something else. I didn't just recommend you because you're my friend. I recommended you because you're the most talented analyst I've ever worked with. Your insights during our Columbia projects were consistently brilliant, and your understanding of operational efficiency is exactly what Blackwood Corporation needs." "Thank you, David. That means everything coming from you." "One more thing. Mr. Blackwood has already seen your academic record, your thesis, and the recommendations from our Columbia professors. He's not meeting with you because he feels sorry for you or because of some viral video. He's meeting with you because you're the best person for this job." At exactly 1:55 p.m., the conference room door opened and Richard Blackwood walked in. He was not what Sarah had expected. Instead of an intimidating corporate titan, she saw a man in his early 60s with kind eyes, wearing a well-tailored but not ostentatious suit, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who had nothing to prove to anyone. "Ms. Martinez," he said, extending his hand with a genuine smile. "I'm Richard Blackwood. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm sorry it took such unpleasant circumstances to bring you to our attention. Mr. Blackwood, thank you for this opportunity. I know it's unusual circumstances. Please, sit," he said, taking a chair across from her rather than at the head of the table. "Ms. Martinez, I want to be completely transparent with you about why you're here. Yes, I saw the video of your interaction with Victoria Sterling, and yes, I was impressed by your professionalism under difficult circumstances, but that's not why I want to offer you this contract. Sarah leaned forward, listening intently. "I want to offer you this contract because David Chen has been telling me about your capabilities for months, because your thesis on supply chain optimization has been cited in 3 different industry journals, because your approach to operational efficiency aligns perfectly with Blackwood Corporation's values and needs. The video just confirmed what I already suspected, that you're exactly the kind of person we want to work with." For the next hour, Sarah presented her analysis and recommendations with the confidence and expertise she'd been building for years. Richard Blackwood asked thoughtful questions, challenged her assumptions in ways that made her think deeper, and engaged with her ideas as intellectual equals. When she finished, Richard smiled and nodded approvingly. "Ms. Martinez, that was one of the most insightful presentations I've heard in years. Your understanding of our industry's challenges is remarkable, and your proposed solutions are both innovative and practical. Thank you, sir. I'd like to offer you an exclusive consulting contract with Blackwood Corporation. $15 million over 2 years, with options for expansion into our international operations. You would be our primary strategic consultant, working directly with me and the executive team." Sarah felt tears of joy threatening to spill over. "Mr. Blackwood, I accept. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for proving that character and competence matter more than pedigree. Welcome to the Blackwood family, Sarah." As they shook hands, Sarah realized that Victoria Sterling's cruelty had inadvertently opened a door to opportunities beyond her wildest dreams. Sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up being the ones who set you free. At that very moment, 40 blocks away, Victoria Sterling was preparing for what she thought would be the triumph of her career. She had no idea that the stupid waitress she'd humiliated that morning was now signing the contract she'd expected to win. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor, and sometimes, just sometimes, it was on the side of the underdog. At exactly 2:15 p.m., Victoria Sterling stepped out of her Blacktown car in front of the Blackwood Corporation building, her confidence as polished as the Italian leather of her briefcase. The afternoon sun glinted off the building's windows, and Victoria took it as a good omen. This was going to be the day she secured the most lucrative contract in Sterling and Associates history. Behind her, 3 junior associates emerged from a second car, each one carefully selected for this moment. There was Marcus Webb, Harvard MBA, impeccably dressed and carrying presentation equipment worth more than most people's cars. Rebecca Liu, Wharton graduate, wheeling a case of bound proposals that had cost $3,000 to produce, each one leather-bound with gold embossing, and David Kim, Stanford graduate, carrying charts and visual aids that had been prepared by a team of graphic designers who specialized in corporate presentations. Victoria had built her reputation on moments like this. She was known throughout New York's business community as the woman who could land any deal, no matter how competitive or complex. The Blackwood Corporation contract wasn't just worth $15 million. It was her entry ticket into the same league as McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, and the other elite firms that had always looked down on Sterling and Associates as new money. "Ms. Sterling," Marcus said as they walked through the revolving doors, "the presentation equipment is all set up, and I've confirmed that Mr. Blackwood will have his full executive team present. This is going to be perfect." Victoria nodded approvingly. She'd been preparing for this presentation for 3 months, ever since David Chen had first approached Sterling and Associates about Blackwood Corporation's need for supply chain optimization consulting. The preliminary meetings had gone exceptionally well, and today was supposed to be a formality, the final presentation before signing the contract that would transform her company's standing in the industry. The Blackwood Corporation lobby was different from what Victoria was used to, where most of her clients favored the kind of intimidating marble and glass displays of wealth that she preferred. Blackwood's lobby felt more substantial. The walls told the story of a company built on hard work and integrity rather than just financial maneuvering. Victoria dismissed it as quaint Midwestern sensibilities. Richard Blackwood might be worth billions, but he'd never fully shed his working-class Detroit roots. "Miss Sterling, A receptionist approached with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, but there's been a change of plans. Mr. Blackwood would like to see you in conference room B instead of the executive boardroom." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together slightly. In 25 years of high-stakes business negotiations, she'd learned that last-minute changes were rarely good news. "Is there a problem with the original room?" "No, ma'am. Just a scheduling adjustment, if you'll follow me." As they walked through the corridor, Victoria noticed something unusual. The typical bustle of corporate life seemed subdued, and several employees were clustered around computers and phones, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. A few glanced in her direction with expressions she couldn't quite read. Was that recognition? Hostility? She pushed the thought aside and focused on her mental preparation for the presentation. Conference room B was smaller than Victoria had expected, with a simple rectangular table and no view of the city skyline. But what truly stopped her in her tracks wasn't the room's modest size. It was the woman sitting at the far end of the table, looking composed and professional, with her own presentation materials spread before her. Sarah Martinez, the waitress from this morning's disaster of an interview, now dressed in the same black blazer and looking like she belonged in this corporate setting. Victoria's mind raced, trying to understand what possible reason Sarah could have for being here. Had she somehow gotten a job with Blackwood Corporation? Was she some kind of plant sent to gather intelligence on Sterling and Associates' presentation? The possibilities were all troubling. "Miss Sterling?" Richard Blackwood's voice cut through her confusion. He was already seated at the head of the table, his expression unreadable, but somehow colder than it had been during their previous meetings. Beside him sat David Chen, whom Victoria remembered from their initial discussions, and two other Blackwood executives she recognized from company photos. "Mr. Blackwood," Victoria replied, setting her briefcase down and trying to regain her composure. "Thank you for arranging this presentation. I believe you'll find our proposal exceeds your expectations in every way." She gestured towards Sarah with barely concealed irritation. "I'm not sure I understand why Ms. Martinez is present for our confidential presentation." "Please, have a seat, Miss Sterling," Richard said without answering her question directly. His tone was polite, but lacking the warmth she remembered from their previous interactions. Victoria remained standing, her confusion turning to irritation. "Mr. Blackwood, with all due respect, there seems to be some mistake. We have an exclusive agreement for this presentation, and I don't understand why someone who was interviewing for a position at my company this morning is now sitting in on our confidential business discussions." Richard Blackwood leaned back in his chair, studying Victoria with the kind of steady gaze that had built a manufacturing empire from a single Detroit factory. "Ms. Sterling, your exclusive agreement with Blackwood Corporation was terminated at 11:47 a.m. this morning. Did you not receive the notification?" The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. Around the table, her associates shifted uncomfortably, exchanging worried glances. Marcus Webb's face went pale, and Rebecca Liu's carefully organized notes suddenly seemed to slip from her grasp. "Terminated?" Victoria's voice was sharper than she intended. "On what grounds?" "Our relationship has been exemplary. Our preliminary proposals have been well received, and we've invested considerable resources in developing solutions for your company." Instead of answering directly, Richard picked up an iPad from the table and turned it toward her. The screen showed a LinkedIn video with a play button and a view counter that made Victoria's blood run cold. 1,147,329 views. "Perhaps you'd like to explain this, Ms. Sterling." Victoria looked at the screen and felt the world tilt beneath her feet. It was a video of her own conference room from that morning, shot from what must have been Jennifer Walsh's position at the table. The video quality was crystal clear, capturing every word, every expression, every moment of the encounter that Victoria had already dismissed from her mind. She watched herself dismiss Sarah's qualifications, saw herself deliver the final, devastating blow. "I honestly don't know who thought it was a good idea to waste our time with a stupid waitress who thinks an MBA makes her qualified to run with the big dogs." The video had 1.2 million views. Over 1 million people had watched Victoria Sterling reveal exactly who she was when she thought no one important was paying attention. "Ms. Sterling," Richard's voice brought her back to the present moment. Blackwood Corporation was built on principles that my grandfather instilled in this company when Italian immigrants like him were being turned away from jobs because of their accents and their backgrounds. He founded this company on the belief that every person deserves dignity and respect, regardless of where they come from. Victoria's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She could feel her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, but she couldn't quite grasp how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. "But sir," she finally managed, "surely you understand that business decisions require practical considerations about qualifications and cultural fit. I may have expressed myself inelegantly, but the underlying concerns about matching consultants with appropriate client expectations—" "Stop!" Richard's voice was firm but not angry. "Ms. Sterling, I've spent the last 3 hours reviewing Ms. Martinez's qualifications, her academic record, her professional references, and her insights into operational efficiency. Her thesis on supply chain optimization has been cited in multiple industry publications. Her recommendations for Henderson Industries were brilliant. She is, by any objective measure, exceptionally qualified for consulting work." Sarah, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke. Her voice was calm and steady, carrying the same dignity that had impressed Richard Blackwood in the video. "Miss Sterling, I want you to know that I don't take any pleasure in this situation. I believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to learn from their mistakes and grow as both professionals and human beings." Victoria found her voice, though it sounded smaller and less commanding than usual. "Ms. Martinez, I may have spoken hastily this morning. The pressure of client demands and scheduling conflicts sometimes leads to unfortunate expressions of frustration. You called me a stupid waitress in front of your entire executive team," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "But this isn't really about me, is it? It's about every person who's ever been dismissed because their background didn't fit someone's narrow definition of success. It's about every person who's been made to feel small because of where they came from, rather than where they're going." Richard Blackwood nodded approvingly. "Ms. Martinez has spent the last hour presenting solutions to our operational challenges that are innovative, practical, and cost-effective. Her understanding of efficiency and customer satisfaction, informed by her diverse background, is exactly what Blackwood Corporation needs. Ms. Sterling," he continued, turning back to Victoria, "you're welcome to present your proposal if you'd like, but I should inform you that we've already made our decision. Ms. Martinez will be our primary strategic consultant under an exclusive $15 million contract over 2 years. The number hit Victoria like a slap. $15 million. The exact figure she'd been counting on to establish Sterling and Associates among the industry's elite firms. The deal she'd been certain was already hers, now being handed to the woman she'd dismissed as unworthy just hours earlier. Behind her, she heard Rebecca Liu's sharp intake of breath. Marcus Webb was staring at his expensive presentation materials as if they'd turned to ash in his hands. David Kim was checking his phone, probably calculating how this disaster would affect his own career prospects. "Mr. Blackwood," Victoria tried one last time. "Surely Sterling and Associates' track record and established reputation should weigh against a single unfortunate interaction. We've successfully completed dozens of major consulting projects. We have the infrastructure, the team, the proven methodologies. You have a company culture that judges people by their pedigree rather than their potential," Richard interrupted. "That's not the kind of partnership Blackwood Corporation is interested in pursuing." Victoria looked around the room, searching for any sign of sympathy or reconsideration, but found none. The Blackwood executives were looking at her with expressions ranging from disapproval to pity. Her own associates were avoiding eye contact entirely, probably already calculating how to distance themselves from this career-ending debacle. "Ms. Sterling," Sarah said, and her tone was surprisingly gentle, "I hope you understand that this isn't about revenge or personal satisfaction. It's about the kind of business culture we want to promote and support. Companies that treat all people with dignity tend to be more successful, more innovative, and more sustainable in the long run." The grace in Sarah's words somehow made everything worse. Victoria had expected anger, gloating, some kind of victory lap that would have made her feel justified in her original assessment. Instead, she was facing a woman who maintained her professionalism and composure even in the moment of her greatest triumph. "I see," Victoria said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. She began gathering her materials with hands that weren't quite steady. "I suppose there's nothing left to discuss." "Ms. Sterling," Richard Blackwood said as she headed toward the door, "I hope this experience gives you an opportunity to reflect on the kind of leader you want to be. Talent and character can come from anywhere, and the companies that recognize that tend to be the ones that thrive." Victoria paused at the door, looking back at the room where her biggest career triumph had just become her most devastating professional failure. Sarah Martinez was already back to discussing implementation timelines with the Blackwood team, looking every inch the successful consultant that Victoria had refused to see that morning. "Ms. Martinez," Victoria said, and everyone in the room turned to look at her. Sarah met her eyes with that same steady dignity she'd shown hours earlier. "Yes, Ms. Sterling. I hope your partnership with Blackwood Corporation is successful." It wasn't an apology. Victoria Sterling wasn't capable of that level of self-reflection yet, but it was perhaps the first genuine thing she'd said all day. "Thank you," Sarah replied simply. "I hope you have a good rest of your day." It was the exact same phrase Sarah had used that morning after Victoria's cruelest moment. But now, in this context, it sounded less like politeness and more like the most gracious form of justice Victoria had ever encountered. As Victoria walked toward the elevator with her shell-shocked associates trailing behind her, she could hear the animated discussion resuming in the conference room. Sarah's voice confidently outlining implementation strategies, Richard Blackwood asking thoughtful questions about timeline and resource allocation. The elevator ride down was conducted in complete silence. Marcus, Rebecca, and David all stared at the floor numbers counting down, each of them probably wondering how this disaster would affect their own careers. Victoria stared at her reflection in the polished steel doors, trying to recognize the woman looking back at her. By the time they reached the ground floor, Victoria's phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. The video had reached 1.5 million views. Her email inbox was filled with messages from clients, competitors, and journalists. The New York Times business section wanted a comment. Forbes was asking for an interview. The Harvard Business Review was inquiring about her thoughts on leadership and workplace culture. As they walked through the Blackwood Corporation lobby, Victoria noticed that several employees were looking at her with recognition, and not the good kind. Word had clearly spread through the building about why Sterling and Associates was no longer welcome. On the sidewalk outside, Victoria's town car was waiting, but she couldn't bring herself to get in immediately. She stood there, watching the flow of Manhattan traffic, trying to process how completely her world had changed in the span of a few hours. "Ms. Sterling," Marcus said hesitantly, "what do we tell the other clients? The media requests, the board meeting tomorrow?" Victoria looked at her associates, three young, ambitious professionals who had hitched their careers to her rising star and were now watching it crash and burn in real time. They deserved better than to be destroyed by her mistakes. "Tell them the truth," she said finally. "Tell them that Victoria Sterling learned a very expensive lesson about the difference between success and character." As her town car pulled away from the curb, Victoria caught a glimpse of the Blackwood Corporation building in the side mirror. Somewhere up there, Sarah Martinez was beginning a partnership that would transform both her life and her career, while Victoria Sterling began the long journey of figuring out how to rebuild her reputation from the ashes of her own cruelty. The irony was perfect in its poetic justice. The woman she had dismissed as a stupid waitress was now enjoying the success that Victoria had thought was rightfully hers, while Victoria herself was learning what it felt like to be judged, found wanting, and dismissed. Sometimes the universe has a way of making sure that everyone gets exactly what they deserve. And Victoria Sterling was about to discover that in the age of social media and viral videos, reputation can be built over decades and destroyed in a single moment of revealed character. The real question was whether she would learn from this experience or let it destroy her completely. Time would tell, but for now, she had a very long night ahead of her and a lot of very difficult conversations to navigate. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sarah's corner office on the 31st floor of the Chrysler Building, casting long golden rays across her mahogany desk. Outside, Manhattan was waking up with its usual energy. Yellow taxis navigating the morning rush, food carts setting up for the breakfast crowd, and thousands of people hurrying to jobs that would shape the day's business landscape. Sarah Martinez, now Sarah Martinez, principal consultant and founder of Martinez and Associates Strategic Consulting, stood at her window, looking out at the city that had once seemed so intimidating and was now her professional home. The brass nameplate on her desk still gave her a small thrill every time she saw it, but it was the framed photo next to it that really mattered. Miguel in his cap and gown at his NYU graduation ceremony, grinning widely as he held up his master's degree in economics. The wall behind her desk told the story of the past 6 months in brass frames and prestigious publications. There was her Forbes 30 Under 30 feature titled From Restaurant Service to Fortune 500 Consulting, How Sarah Martinez Redefined Success. The Harvard Business Review had published her article on operational efficiency through diverse perspectives. The Wall Street Journal had featured her consulting firm in a piece about the new generation of business leaders. And her personal favorite, a framed letter from a young woman in Chicago who had seen the video and decided to go back to school for her MBA despite financial challenges and family doubts. Her phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. 6 months since the video that changed everything. Proud of you every single day, Hermana. Dad called last night. He saw you on CNN and cried. Happy tears, obviously. Sarah smiled, remembering how her father had reacted when she'd first told him about her consulting firm. Mija, he'd said in Spanish, his voice thick with emotion. Your mother and I came to this country so you could have opportunities we never dreamed of. But you didn't just take those opportunities, you created them for others too. A gentle knock on her office door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called. Jennifer Walsh peeked her head around the door, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the kind of smile that usually meant good news. Got a minute? I have updates on 3 different fronts, and I think you're going to want to hear all of them. Always, Sarah said, gesturing to the comfortable chairs arranged around a small conference table by the window. How did the Morrison Industries presentation go yesterday? Jennifer set down the coffee and pulled out her iPad, but she was grinning too widely to look professional. They signed the contract this morning, 2-year engagement, $8.5 million. And Sarah, they specifically mentioned that they chose us because of our reputation for treating people with dignity and respect throughout the entire consulting process. That's amazing news, Sarah said, though she wasn't surprised. In the 6 months since Martinez and Associates had been established, they'd built a reputation that went beyond just excellent consulting work. They were known for their collaborative approach, their commitment to developing talent at client companies rather than just extracting value, and their practice of hiring consultants from diverse backgrounds who brought unique perspectives to business challenges. What's the second piece of good news? Sarah asked. The Harvard Business School case study is finished. Professor Williams sent over the final draft this morning. It's being published in next month's issue, and they're already getting requests from other business schools who want to use it in their leadership and ethics courses. Sarah shook her head in amazement. 6 months ago, she'd been sitting in a coffee shop in Queens, wondering how she was going to pay her student loans. Now her story was being taught at some of the most prestigious business schools in the country as an example of how character and competence could triumph over prejudice and entitlement. And the third thing? Sarah asked. Jennifer's expression grew more serious, but there was still something hopeful in her eyes. This one's a little more complicated. I got a call this morning from Victoria Sterling. Sarah set down her coffee cup, giving Jennifer her full attention. What kind of call? She wants to meet with you in person. She said she has something important to discuss, and that she understands if you're not interested in seeing her. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the city sprawling below them. She'd followed Victoria Sterling's story over the past 6 months, partly out of curiosity and partly out of something that might have been compassion. The fallout from the video had been swift and devastating. Sterling and Associates had lost not just the Blackwood contract, but several other major clients who'd seen the video and decided they didn't want to work with a firm that treated people that way. Victoria had initially tried to weather the storm, issuing carefully worded statements about learning experiences and growth opportunities. But as more stories emerged, former employees sharing their own experiences with Victoria's management style, clients quietly moving their business elsewhere, top talent leaving for competitor firms, it became clear that her reputation might never recover. 3 months after the video went viral, Victoria had stepped down as CEO of Sterling and Associates. The company had been sold to a larger consulting group, and most of the original staff had been let go or reassigned. Victoria herself had largely disappeared from the public eye, though Sarah had heard rumors that she was doing some kind of volunteer work. What did she want to discuss? Sarah asked. She wouldn't say over the phone, just that she's been doing a lot of thinking over the past 6 months, and she wanted to apologize to you properly. She also mentioned something about a project she's working on that she thinks you might find interesting. Sarah considered this. Part of her was curious about what Victoria Sterling had been doing since her very public fall from grace, but a larger part of her was cautious about reopening a chapter of her life that had been so painful, even if it had ultimately led to incredible success. "What do you think?" Sarah asked Jennifer. "Honestly, I think people deserve second chances when they're genuinely trying to change, and I think you're strong enough now to face her on your own terms, in your own space, with nothing to prove and nothing to lose." Sarah nodded slowly. Jennifer was right. She was in a completely different position now than she'd been 6 months ago. She had her own successful company, her own reputation, her own power. If Victoria Sterling wanted to meet with her, it would be as equals, or perhaps with Sarah holding most of the cards. "Set up the meeting," Sarah said, "but I have conditions. It happens here in my office, and I want you present as well, since you were there for the original incident." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption, but that doesn't mean I have to make it easy." 2 hours later, Sarah was reviewing contracts for a new client when her assistant buzzed her. "Ms. Martinez, Victoria Sterling is here for your 2 p.m. appointment. Send her in, please." Sarah remained seated at her desk as Victoria entered her office, and the change was immediately apparent. Gone was the imperious woman in the $1,000 suit who had dismissed Sarah 6 months earlier. This Victoria Sterling looked smaller somehow, wearing a simple grey dress and minimal jewellery, her silver hair pulled back in a much less formal style than Sarah remembered. "Ms. Martinez," Victoria said, extending her hand across the desk. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. I know I don't deserve your time or consideration." "Please sit," Sarah replied, gesturing to the chairs by the window. Jennifer joined them, her iPad ready to take notes if needed. Victoria looked around the office, taking in the view, the prestigious diplomas and awards on the walls, the obvious signs of success and influence. "This is beautiful," she said. "You've built something remarkable here." "Thank you," Sarah said simply. "You mentioned you had something you wanted to discuss." Victoria took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for what came next. "First, I owe you an apology. Not the kind of corporate non-apology I issued in those press statements, but a real personal acknowledgement of how badly I treated you and what my behavior revealed about the kind of person I had become." She looked directly at Sarah, her eyes showing a vulnerability that hadn't been there 6 months earlier. "I called you a stupid waitress because I was threatened by your talent and your integrity. I dismissed your background because I was insecure about my own. I treated you cruelly because I had lost sight of what real success looks like." Sarah listened without interrupting, studying Victoria's face for signs of sincerity or manipulation. "The video going viral wasn't what changed me," Victoria continued. "It was watching it over and over again, seeing myself through other people's eyes, and realizing that I had become someone I didn't recognize, someone my younger self would have been ashamed of." "What have you been doing since you left Sterling and Associates?" Jennifer asked. Victoria's expression lightened slightly. I've been working with a non-profit organization called Second Chance Professionals. We provide business mentorship and consulting services to first-generation college graduates from working-class backgrounds who are trying to break into corporate careers. Sarah raised an eyebrow. That's quite a change from Fortune 500 consulting. It is, Victoria agreed, and it's been the most meaningful work I've ever done. Sarah, I've met dozens of people with stories like yours, brilliant, hard-working individuals who face prejudice and dismissal because their backgrounds don't fit some narrow definition of appropriate experience. She paused, reaching into her purse to pull out a folder. Which brings me to why I wanted to meet with you. I've been developing a program to connect established consulting firms with talented professionals from diverse backgrounds. A kind of pipeline that helps people like you find opportunities without having to face the kind of treatment I subjected you to. Victoria handed the folder to Sarah. I'd like you to look at this proposal. It's a partnership program between Martinez and Associates and Second Chance Professionals. You would provide mentorship, internship opportunities, and potentially full-time positions for candidates from our program. In exchange, you'd have access to a talent pool of diverse, motivated professionals who could bring unique perspectives to your client work. Sarah opened the folder and began reading, her expression growing more interested as she progressed through the detailed proposal. It was thorough, well-researched, and clearly designed to benefit everyone involved, the candidates, the consulting firms, and ultimately the clients who would benefit from more diverse thinking. This is impressive work, Sarah said after several minutes, but I have to ask, why come to me with this? There are larger firms that could provide more opportunities. Victoria was quiet for a moment before answering. Because you understand what it's like to be underestimated. Because you've built a company culture that values talent over pedigree. And because, she paused, looking uncomfortable, because I need to know that some good came from that terrible morning 6 months ago. Victoria, Sarah said, using her first name for the first time, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you really believe you've changed, or are you just trying to rebuild your reputation? Victoria was quiet for a long time, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. 6 months ago, I would have given you some polished answer about personal growth and learning experiences, but the truth is, I don't know yet. I know I'm trying to change. I know I want to be better than the person I was, but real change takes time, and I'm still figuring out who I want to be. Her honesty was unexpected, and somehow more compelling than any carefully crafted redemption narrative would have been. I can tell you this, Victoria continued. Working with Second Chance Professionals has shown me what I missed when I was focused only on pedigree and connections. Some of the most innovative thinking I've encountered has come from people who had to work their way up, who understand efficiency and problem-solving in ways that people who've never faced real challenges simply can't. Sarah looked at Jennifer, who nodded slightly. They discussed this exact phenomenon, how their consulting team's diverse backgrounds led to creative solutions that more traditional firms missed. I'm interested in the program, Sarah said finally, but I have conditions, or name them. First, this has to be about the candidates, not about rehabilitating your image. If I sense that you're using these people as props in your redemption story, the partnership ends immediately. Agreed. Second, I want to be involved in the selection process. I want to meet with candidates personally and make sure they're getting real opportunities, not just token positions. Absolutely. Third, I want quarterly reviews of the program's effectiveness, measured by actual career advancement for participants, not just feel-good stories. That's exactly what we need, Victoria said, and for the first time since she'd entered the office, she looked genuinely excited. Sarah, I think this could be something special, a way to systematically change how the consulting industry thinks about talent and opportunity. They spent the next hour going through the proposal in detail, discussing implementation timelines, success metrics, and potential challenges. By By the end of the meeting, Sarah found herself genuinely optimistic about the partnership's possibilities. As Victoria prepared to leave, she turned back to Sarah one more time. "I know I can't undo what I did to you that morning, but I hope that maybe we can build something together that prevents other people from facing what you went through." "Victoria," Sarah said, "everyone deserves a second chance. The question is what we do with it." After Victoria left, Sarah and Jennifer sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, processing what had just happened. "So," Jennifer finally said, "are we really going to partner with the woman who called you a stupid waitress 6 months ago?" Sarah laughed. "You know what? I think we are. Not because I've forgiven and forgotten, but because the program could genuinely help people who need opportunities. Plus," Jennifer added with a grin, "there's something beautifully ironic about Victoria Sterling now working to create opportunities for people she used to dismiss." "The best kind of redemption," Sarah agreed, "is when people don't just acknowledge their mistakes, but actively work to prevent others from making the same ones." As the afternoon sun shifted across her office, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that rainy morning in September. She'd learned that dignity couldn't be taken away, only given away. That character revealed under pressure was the truest measure of a person, that sometimes the worst moments in our lives can become the catalysts for our greatest growth. Her phone buzzed with a text from David Chen at Blackwood Corporation. "Saw the Times article about your expansion into international markets. Richard wants to know if you're interested in consulting on our European operations. Also, congratulations on the Harvard case study. You're officially a business school legend now." Sarah smiled and began typing her response. 6 months ago, she'd been a woman trying to prove she belonged in rooms like Victoria Sterling's conference room. Now she was someone who created those rooms, who decided who got invited to the table, and who made sure that talent and character mattered more than pedigree and connections. The video that had gone viral showing Victoria's cruelty had ultimately become much more than a moment of justice or vindication. It had started conversations about respect, dignity, and opportunity throughout the business world. It had inspired other people to share their stories of being underestimated or dismissed. It had led to real changes in how companies thought about hiring and advancement. Most importantly, it had reminded everyone that in an interconnected world where reputations can be built or destroyed in moments, the way we treat others, especially those we perceive as having less power, reveals who we really are. As Sarah prepared for her next meeting, she thought about Victoria Sterling's question about whether people can really change. The answer, she decided, wasn't yes or no. The answer was that people can choose to change, moment by moment, decision by decision, relationship by relationship. Victoria Sterling was making that choice now. 6 months after her moment of revealed character cost her everything she thought mattered. Whether she'd stick with it remained to be seen, but Sarah was willing to give her the chance to prove that redemption was possible. After all, everyone deserves the opportunity to show the world who they're capable of becoming. Even former CEOs who once thought waitresses were too stupid to understand business. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen not when we're building ourselves up, but when we're helping others rise. And sometimes the people we lift up are the very ones we once tried to tear down. The circle was complete, but the story was just beginning. In boardrooms across New York and beyond, a new generation of leaders was emerging. People who understood that true success isn't measured by who you exclude, but by who you choose to include. And at the center of it all was a woman who had once been dismissed as a stupid waitress and was now changing the face of American business, one opportunity at a time. The Harvard Business School auditorium was packed with MBA students, faculty, and business leaders who had come to hear Sarah Martinez deliver the keynote address for their annual Leadership and Ethics Symposium. As she stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces representing the future of American business, Sarah felt the weight of how far she'd traveled from that rainy September morning. A year and a half ago, she began. "I was sitting in a conference room, not unlike many of the ones you'll encounter in your careers, being told that my background as a restaurant server made me unqualified to advise Fortune 500 companies. The person who told me that was wrong about my qualifications, but she was right about one thing. My background did make me different from traditional consultants. It just made me better, not worse." In the third row, she spotted a familiar face, Victoria Sterling, taking notes like any other student, her expression focused and engaged. They'd been working together for 8 months now, and the Second Chance Professionals program had successfully placed 47 diverse candidates in consulting positions across 15 different firms. Victoria had kept her word about genuine change. She'd turned down 3 lucrative offers to return to traditional consulting, choosing instead to build something that mattered more than money. She was still Victoria Sterling, still sharp, still ambitious, still demanding excellence. But now, those qualities served a different master. "The question I'm asked most often," Sarah continued, "is whether people can really change, whether someone who reveals their character in a moment of cruelty can genuinely become someone better. And my answer is this: change isn't a destination, it's a practice. It's a choice we make every day about who we want to be and how we want to treat the people around us." After her speech, during the reception, a young woman approached Sarah with the kind of nervous energy that comes from having something important to say. "Ms. Martinez, I'm Maria Santos. I'm in my 2nd year here, and I wanted to thank you. I saw your video when it first went viral, and it convinced me to apply to business school, even though everyone told me my background in childcare wouldn't be valued in the corporate world." Sarah smiled. "How's it going?" "I just accepted a position with McKinsey for after graduation. They said my experience managing difficult situations with limited resources was exactly what they needed for their healthcare consulting division." These were the moments that mattered most to Sarah, not the magazine covers or the prestigious speaking engagements, but the individual lives that had been changed by the simple idea that everyone deserves to be judged by their potential rather than their past. As the evening wound down, Victoria approached Sarah with 2 cups of coffee, just as Jennifer had done in those early days at Martinez and Associates. "Penny for your thoughts?" Victoria asked. "Just thinking about how strange life can be," Sarah replied. "A year and a half ago, you were the person who almost destroyed my confidence. Tonight, you're my partner in trying to make sure no one else has to go through what I did. Do you ever regret it?" Victoria asked. "Working with me, I mean. Giving me a second chance when you had every right to slam the door in my face?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "I regret that it took public humiliation for you to recognize your behavior was wrong. I regret that other people probably suffered under your leadership before you decided to change. But I don't regret working with you now, because I think we're accomplishing something important together." Victoria nodded. "I've been thinking about something you said in that conference room, about how this wasn't just about you, but about everyone who's ever been judged by their background rather than their abilities. I think about that a lot when I'm working with our candidates." "Good," Sarah said. "That means you understand what this is really about." Today, as they walked out of the Harvard Business School together, the former waitress turned successful consultant and the former CEO turned advocate for second chances, Sarah reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. The video that had made her